Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the webinar on finding an ingredient supplier. My name is Dolores Serafin, and I work for Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation with the Food and Bioprocessing branch. I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we start, here are a few housekeeping items. As you may have noticed if you've been on our webinars before, we have a new platform here, so it's easier maybe. So if you would like to ask a question, please click on the question mark symbol that is on the top right of your screen. I will make sure that our presenter addresses all of the questions at the end of the presentation. You will also see a react symbol at the bottom left of your screen. This allows you to show your reactions to anything being said during this webinar. The webinar is being recorded and a link will be sent to you in an email after the live webinar. So today's webinar is about how selecting the right ingredient supplier can have a significant impact on your business. Business owners depend on suppliers to provide quality, consistent, and reliable ingredients. This 60-minute webinar will address the role of an ingredient supplier, how to find and evaluate a reputable company, and how to develop a supplier food safety assurance program for your business. Our speakers today are Lindsay Sutton and Shazia Danji. Lindsay brings over 15 years of expertise in the food and beverage industry, having worked at leading ingredient manufacturers and now serving as a technical account manager for Western Canada at IMCD. Lindsay excels in technical ingredients, food manufacturing, and food retail dynamics. Her passion for innovation and people drives excellence in this varied field. Shazia has worked for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, also known as CFIA, for the last 17 years, and most of that as a senior compliance officer in Edmonton. I will now hand it over to Lindsay to share her knowledge with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dolores, and welcome to each of you. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this because it sounds like a topic that wouldn't be that interesting, but it's very, very important to your business. So I'm going to dive in. So as Dolores mentioned, I am Lindsay Sutton. I'm based in Edmonton, but my accounts work everywhere from Montreal to Vancouver. I have a particular specialty in plant-based proteins, but I have purchased or I have sourced many different ingredients over the years, and it hasn't always been easy. So hopefully I will be able to leave you with some tips that will help you with that journey as well. And then maybe you can teach people too. All right, so I'm just going to go into the next slide. I have two screens working, so I've got the one screen on the other side. So as Dolores mentioned, this is really important for your company to find the right ingredients. It's no surprise that quality ingredients equal quality products. So why this matters is going to matter as you grow. So perhaps a lot of you on the call are thinking about growing, and maybe this is something that you've already started to delve into is ingredients. But basically starting out or even just scaling, finding the right ingredients is important. So that's kind of a no-brainer. But some of the other things you'll be surprised to know too is sometimes when you're growing into new markets or new retailers, you'll have to source new ingredients. Some retailers require or prohibit ingredients, which is a surprise for some. So let's say that's Whole Foods Market. Now you're surprised with, I can't have this one ingredient. So it sets you back a little bit too. But working with a reliable and trustworthy supplier can help you streamline your supply chain and ensure consistent product quality as well as costs. So I'm going to go into some of the tips that you'll kind of see over time as you're looking for new ingredients. So as I mentioned, you may be looking at scaling your business. And when I talk about scaling your business, I refer to you're growing. So maybe that's a better way of saying you're growing, yay. But scalability is really gets down to that process. So you're scaling your process. You're scaling everything to do with your food safety, to your staffing, to your equipment, and with that, your ingredients as well. So that's why it's really important. So scalability requires you to grow with your partners. So again, we'll get into choosing the right partner. Your food safety needs to grow with you. So your ingredient choices need to change as well, according to meet that food safety. And Shazia will go into much more detail on food safety, but I don't want to minimize that part of it. You might have some new processes and new equipment. That's all very exciting, but sometimes those ingredients don't work. So that, you need to start thinking about that as well. Perhaps, as I mentioned, you're getting into new retailers and your shelf life needs to get longer. So instead of something that you produced in a commercial kitchen and sold within the first 2 months, this is something that now needs to have a shelf life stability of 6 to 9 months, perhaps, according to that retailer. You might have freeze and thaw challenges, so you can ship it to the customer and keep that frozen supply chain happening, but that is not always in your control after it leaves your door. So having that freeze and thaw stability as well. The type of package might change, so that'll impact your ingredients. As I mentioned, there's a longer route to the customer, and you want to make sure that that customer is getting a perfect product every time. As I mentioned, the new retailer requirements and the ingredients that that might result in, and then fine-tuning your prices and margins. And not to mention all the certifications that you need as you grow. So in the beginning, sometimes those certifications are not necessarily so. Maybe you started with organic, or maybe you're venturing into having kosher and halal to meet certain buyer requirements. So this will all make sourcing ingredients a bit more challenging. So starting smart. So it is just starting smart and thinking about your process. Everyone on the call knows their process in and out, but it'd be surprising to know that sometimes there's these things that we take for granted or we don't think about. Even if you're venturing into new equipment, know that process in and out, because that's going to impact your ingredients going in. Really knowing your ingredient volumes going into your batches will be important. I've worked with hundreds of food and beverage manufacturers, and sometimes it's a pinch of this and a pinch of that. So knowing how much you add as you go is really important, and in knowing what ingredient and the volumes of ingredient that you'll need. Another thing I can't stress enough is knowing your cost of goods, and I'll refer to that as your COGS. This is something that I think a lot of people I've worked with have said, it's okay, when I'm scaling my business, when I grow my business, I'll be buying things at volume discounts and things are just going to be flowing great. Well, surprise, your margins, if you didn't have margins in the beginning, you won't have margins later, because with your scaling of your business, your food safety scales, you have more staffing, you have HR, and all of these things just amplify. So knowing your cost of goods ahead of time and building that in will be really important for your business and your profitability, but also letting you know what ingredients you can choose. So if some things are just not going to fit because of your margin, maybe that needs to go. So knowing your food safety and certifications that you and your buyer will need, as I mentioned a few times. Also, if you're scaling your business and you're using a co-packer, knowing and starting smart with knowing what the co-packer will need will really help your choice of ingredients. It would be really unfortunate to venture in and find an ingredient that works great, only to find out that the co-packer can't use it in that tote or that drum, or they can't even use it because of food safety. And getting to know the ingredient ecosystem. So there is an ingredient ecosystem. When I tell people what I do for a living, it's very strange. They're like, what? But food ingredients go in everything. So knowing that ecosystem and who plays in what will be important. You don't have to know everything, but asking around. I would say starting smart also includes working with a food technologist. So you know your product in and out and you produce it with perfection. A food technologist will help you scale your product so that they can think about the process, they'll think about the packaging, and they'll think about everything to build that shelf stability to get your product to the customer. So a food technologist is worth their weight, worth the price to working with them, because you're not going to have these errors over time. And really starting smart and thinking about what are your values. So that value could be creating a product that has exceptional sustainability standards. It has ethical standards for the chocolate you choose. It has clean ingredients so that your customer can trust what you're making. So again, all this kind of goes into thinking about what do I want to choose for ingredients and does it meet some of these parameters? I do have a bit of a checklist coming up that will help as well, but these are just sort of those starting questions you can start thinking about. As you can tell, each of these decisions that you make along that chain will impact what ingredients you purchase. So where to start? I popped ChatGPT in there. I've used this a lot this last year. So online searching is no surprise, but of course, if you guys have heard of ChatGPT, this allows you to ask basically a question in a forum. You just ask a question like, how much pectin do I need to make a firm jam? I've literally asked that question and ChatGPT will search all over the internet and find a pretty good answer. Of course, it's not always perfect, but even like, what does citric acid do in a sauce? It'll come up with telling me to. So that's a really cool way. I know ChatGPT might be a bit scary for some, but just try it. It's very cool. But using ways to find ingredients does go back to word of mouth as well. So asking your peers, maybe you've done an online search and now you want to see what your peers have to say. Talking at networking events, posting a question on LinkedIn saying, hey, where do I find this particular red cocoa that I need? There's a lot of local options as well. So thinking about if the local option really fits the values that you want to bring in your product. So this could be, local options can not only help on the freshness of those tomatoes, but it could also build into that story that you want to share with your customers, that you're sharing, talking about the sourcing that you do and how you're bringing that fresh product to market for that salsa because you're using local tomatoes. So there's a lot of local options. So looking at that, yes and no, they can be more or less expensive. It really depends. So it just comes down to what are your values that you want to instill in your product. Trade events. So there's a lot of just ingredient trade events. So these are not consumer products. They sound really boring, but I love these trade events. So it's all about ingredients. It's all about innovation. So I've added some links in here for you to take a look at as well. There's a really fun, there's a typo there. So it's not the Canadian, it's the Canadian Food Innovation Network. They have a really fun forum where you can drop a question in this chat forum called Yodel. And I've seen lots of questions over the last few weeks like, hey, I'm looking for a co-packer doing this, or hey, I'm in the Toronto area and I'm looking for butter, or whatever the case might be. So really cool place to ask questions because this is a forum of your peers. So it's nice that we don't have to reinvent wheels. We just ask people who have looked for these things before. A couple other links like UL Prospector. So that might be a great place for you to, search out looking for particular, like the example of citric acid. Where do I even start with that? So looking for ingredients does depend on the type of ingredient you need. So there's different partners for bakery, dairy, protein, and chemical. And when I say chemical, it's not in a negative context. It's really talking about these chemicals like a pectin, for instance. It's not really a chemical, but how do I define it, right? Also, your co-packer, if you're using a co-packer, will probably have some good ideas on where to get products as well, because they might be sourcing it. And I go back to that food technologist. They know where to get some of these strange enzymes or whatever you're looking for. So, as I mentioned, so online, so just sort of the pathway of when I would choose different partners or where I would look for different ingredients does depend. So online is a great place. So there's lots of different resources. It's difficult to know because a lot of them are very specific to consumers. So no, I don't want to buy that pectin just in a small sachet. I need a lot more. You can get it direct from the grower. I talked about that tomato story of finding your tomatoes locally or ingredients and grains. Don't discount the wholesale club for sure. So there are some customers that I've worked with that said, for the amount of oil I need to buy, it's just easier for me to go down the road to the wholesale club, and it's actually cheaper sometimes as well. The wholesale club would be something like the TGP Cash and Carry around Alberta, as well as the superstores or the Real Canadian Wholesale Club, I think it's called. So those are great resources looking for large bags of salt and large bags of starch or whatever you need. There's also food ingredient distributors. So a food ingredient distributor is different than a retail distributor. So these ingredient distributors, surprise, they just supply ingredients and they do a great job of sourcing those things. So you can kind of see in the brackets that you might have a lower minimum order quantity. That's what I refer to in the MOQs. You might have some reduced lead times, etc. Also dry blenders. So there's a lot of dry blenders, spice blenders, bakery blenders that can help procure and source ingredients as well. So that's really helpful. Also, you can go direct to the supplier. Caveat saying that their volumes could be, and their minimum order quantity can be quite large. They might be not local to you. So dealing with the imports and bringing things in can be challenging. Most of the time, dealing directly with a supplier, you need to have quite large volumes because it needs to make sense, right? So that's why ingredient distributors make sense. So in essence, the ingredient distributor is buying directly from the supplier and they're bringing it in, let's say in a truckload. So IMCD brings in a particular type of functional starch, for example, where we're buying multiple truckloads. And so it really helps our customer to purchase not a full truckload. A lot of suppliers, a lot of ingredient suppliers will require large volumes that we're buying and that we're securing. So as I mentioned, an ingredient distributor sources out different ingredients. There's lots of different ingredient distributors with different specialties. So that's why it's sort of tough to understanding that ecosystem. When people start out, they don't really know where to go. But here are the values of why working with a distributor makes sense. So as I mentioned, less than pallet orders or even bag orders are possible. The price is a lot less because the distributor is buying at volume. So they're the ones buying the multiple truckloads a year. And you get the benefit of just saying, hey, I want a bag, but you're not going to be buying the, the full amount, right? You're not going to buy that one bag amount from the supplier. Often the distributors are stocking locally, or at least in Canada. And so you get that lead time reduction as well. A lot of ingredient manufacturers do not have sales staff, so that you don't really have a choice. So you might talk to IFF Danisco for a dairy culture, and they're just going to say, hey, you got to talk to this partner in order to get that dairy culture, being their distributor. A lot of these distributors will offer technical assistance. So example is, we at IMCD know our ingredients really well. We all have technical backgrounds. So my background's in chemistry. So we're able to assist our customers in finding the right ingredient at the right time. We have pectin specialists, we have commodity specialists. We understand our ingredients really well. So utilize that resource. As I mentioned, delivery, flexibility, and service. So there's a couple of extra things. These manufacturers are not always great on service because they don't have the team of customer service. So an ingredient distributor does make sense. So if I look at the spectrum of large ingredient manufacturers, I would say probably 100% of them use an ingredient distributor, because we're, as the ingredient distributor, able to access a whole marketplace because we have our customers. So the supplier really loves that. So types of ingredient distributors, I won't go into all of these ones, but it really does depend on what you're looking for. So there are food service distributors, and those are ones like Gordon Food Service or Cisco. And they actually do have some ingredients too. So it's a great place. So let's say Pratt's, for instance, purchases salt by the pallet, and now you can go and pick up your 25-kilogram bag of salt, for example. So here's some examples of other ingredient distributors that can help you over time as well. And obviously happy to help you to navigate that if you're ever looking for something. Each of these ingredient distributors, we don't really compete. We really do work in an ecosystem where we have different specialties and different ingredients that we all specialize in. So choosing smart, really asking yourself these questions. This is something that, these questions might come up over time. So, you can see that, is your flavor going to be impacted when you choose your ingredient? Will my product continue to look stable and look good? I talked about that scaling. Well, is the ingredient actually going to help with that? How is it going to work in the packaging? Is it a hazardous ingredient? Is that going to challenge you on the production floor? Do you just need a tiny drop and your staff could mess up and add too much? So there's some things that you need to navigate. It might seem like the right decision to get something that's, let's say, a particular ingredient that's added into oil to help with dispersion within the bread that you're making. That's probably easier than just adding a tiny bit of something that can mess up your whole batch. So thinking about things is really important. So, going with it's like the direction that you want to go, start with that direction, right? So asking yourselves these questions. So choosing a partner. So you've chosen a partner, you're like, yay, I found the citric acid I need. Which seems like a strange thing. So, hey, I found the cocoa I need. Let's go with cocoa. That's more delicious than citric acid. So when you're talking to your partner, be really clear on the quality that you need. So if you need certain certifications, as well as the quantities you need and your budget constraints. So I get someone reaching out to me probably every hour asking for, hey, do you have this? If I don't know the quantities that you need, it's tough for me to assess. whether or not this makes sense, because sometimes our minimum orders are still really high, or sometimes it's something that, we can't really source because you need way more than we have, for instance. So understanding what your quantity is really important. So next thing is requesting samples. Play around with them on the benchtop, obviously. Get to know the supplier's minimum order quantity. So can you meet that? It's like, oh no, it's ingredient works great, but I have to buy a pallet and that will do me for 3 years. I hear that a lot too. So that's really challenging. So really knowing what you need to know beforehand. Know your lead times. So when I refer to lead times, it's how long it'll take for the ingredient after you order it to get to you. Yes, sometimes it can take 6 months. That's not beyond the realm of reality. And it's not just because of the COVID challenges, that's just the reality of the supply for something. So knowing that ahead of time is important. And again, going back and asking, is there technical assistance that partner provides? Is there customer service that they're providing that's really good, or it's not good? So normally if you're seeing some customer service challenges, that'll probably really annoy you down the road. So finding a partner that makes sense and that's servicing really well. So qualifying your ingredient. So this is when I refer to you've chosen your ingredient and now you're going to qualify it, meaning that you're going to start gathering all the things that you need in order to say like, hey, I've approved it. It's ready to go. I'm ready to buy it. So some of these things is, no surprise, assessing the sample, but you can also ask for a larger sample for a production run. Oftentimes, quite a few ingredient suppliers will provide that because it's tough to see what's happening on the bench top of your, using your small oven. You need to scale it up to the larger oven that you might have to make sure it works the same. Next for that qualification is making sure that you have all the quality documentation. So this is something that is a bane of existence for ingredient suppliers, is because of all these documentation that is necessary. When I started in the industry in the early 2000s, this was starting to happen. There was a lot more, of course, the kosher and the halal, but now there's just so many more things that are needed for a manufacturer such as yourself to qualify it, to make sure that it's safe enough and meets the certifications that you need. So don't be afraid to ask these questions and make sure that you can get them. Of course, the price is going to be important, but think about the freight as well. So the freight will surprise you. One bag could take several $100s to get to you, and that needs to come into the effect as well. So there's lots of little questions that you can review, and I think you guys will get a copy of these slides. So just thinking about things is all I'm asking on this case. So working on pricing. So pricing is important. You can ask for a price adjustment. So if you get a quote, you can definitely say, hey, this is my budget. As I mentioned, if you had a target price that you're working towards, but being realistic that, you get what you pay for sometimes too. Knowing your annual volumes is really important. So if a customer says to me, hey, I need half a pallet, 500 kilograms this year, that helps me to go back and maybe ask for supplier support or not, or getting them to, if it's going to be 3 pallets a year, that really helps me to build the case on price. But be realistic. I've had many customers say, oh my goodness, I'm going to need 1,000,000 kilograms of pea protein and this year. So it needs to be rooted in reality. So it needs to say, okay, well, what's realistic this year, right? Because I don't want to work on a price of 1,000,000 kilograms of pea protein only to find out that we never met that volume. And now the supplier is just less trusting, right? So they're not going to offer that pricing anymore. So, and as I mentioned, the pallet orders. So if you are ordering less than a pallet, consider potentially ordering that volume, that boosted volume, because then you might be able to get some pallet breaks. You might get some volume discounts. Sure, you might have to store that product for a while, and that will be good for a whole year, but it could save you in the long run. There are things like pallet break fees. So if you just want a bag, there could be a pallet break fee that you're paying. So obviously these little things that will come over time. So as I mentioned, I have lots of little tips, but here's just some last little tips in closing. So lead times can be very long, so add extra time. I don't ever want to see a customer be short of product and be shut down. Yes, this happens quite often in the business that we're in, but at the same time, the more that you can build a little bit of a buffer on that lead time. So they're saying, hey, it's 21 days lead time. Just add extra time because things happen, as you know, on freight. I would say avoid placing last minute rushes, because that's just going to create potentially extra costs for you for rush fees and also just strife. You don't want to be dealing with that. So that would be the, right in closing thing. Don't be rushing all the time for ingredients because this is tough for everyone along the chain. Obviously, keep close every year once you had a partner on their food safety and their certification, so you know that you're going to there's nothing lapsing, like, oh, surprise, their kosher certificate lapsed, which means that your kosher certificate has lapsed. So, oof, well, in essence, the ingredients that went into it does. So your ingredient supplier can really impact your certifications as well. Driving home, that watch your cost of goods, your COGS, watch those, because your cost of goods as they go, and if the ingredient prices increase, that can really increase or really decrease your margins, and now you're making less. And remember, this is not your hobby, this is your business. And if you're using a co-packer, just be mindful that if they are sourcing ingredients for you, there might be a charge. And they're usually very upfront about that. But thinking about that value that they're providing, they're sourcing it, they're storing it, they're probably getting a volume discount, but sometimes it's better to just source it yourself, because then you're not paying that 5% extra fee, sometimes even 15% for that co-packer to source the ingredients for you. So looks like we're pretty good on time, which is amazing for me. So in essence, it's looking for the right ingredient that you just have smooth sailing, because you're going to have a lot of other things to deal with your food product, not only retailers, or if you're selling to a restaurant or you have your own storefront, you don't really want the ingredient to be the issue. So keep communicating with your partner. Share your forecast. That's really important. If you anticipate adding another retailer that's going to increase your volumes over time, or you've lost a retailer, communicating that forecast of volumes to your ingredient partner is going to be important. And then, no surprise, I love innovation. There's lots of cool innovations happening in the ingredient space, so that's really fun. So get to know what's new and what's happening, and that's on events and seminars. So mostly it's just having fun, but my contact information is here. I know a lot of the players that are out there, so if you ever just want to reach out, it's not saying that IMCD has everything, but for the most part, I kind of know. And if I don't, ChatGPT might help. But it's been a pleasure. So thank you for joining us. And now Shazia can delve into the stickier parts, which food safety is going to be so important to you guys. So good luck on your search for ingredients.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I will get you to unshare your screen. Perfect. Shazia, I'll give you presenter capabilities here so you can share your screen right away. And Lindsay, you can turn off your camera if you'd like for now. All right, we're just waiting for Shazia there. And if you'd like to turn on your camera, Shazia, that would be fantastic.
Perfect. It's just loading.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
All right.
great. Do you guys see that presentation there?
You bet. You're all good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dolores. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot. Kind of what businesses have to go through. Yeah, like Lindsay said, I'll be going through a bit of the stickier stuff, kind of what you're going to be looking at in creating a program to get these ingredient suppliers. So let's get into that. So I'm going to be covering the Supplier Food Safety Assurance Program. Oh, okay. So why having a program is important, the roles and responsibilities, what should be included in a supplier food safety assurance program. Today we'll talk about having a food safety assurance program. Basically, what are the roles and responsibilities? I'm sorry, get my mouse here on the right screen. Food businesses are responsible for complying with the law. Compliance is demonstrated by ensuring that the commodities and processes for which they are responsible meet regulatory requirements. If a written preventative control plan is required, the food business develops a PCP with supporting documents, monitors, maintains the evidence of its implementation, and verifies that all control measures are effective. The CFI verifies the compliance of a food business by conducting activities that include inspection, surveillance, and when non-compliance is identified, the CFI then takes appropriate compliance and enforcement actions. With the program, you can establish a product specification and criteria requirement for your suppliers that they need to comply with. Clearly communicate the product criteria and requirements to your suppliers, and establish a list of suppliers willing and able to provide products that are safe and suitable for use. A program should include the following elements. So defining product specifications, supplier selection, terms of a supplier agreement, supplier list, maintenance, and verification. A program is one type of control measure that can help ensure that the ingredients, materials, and non-food chemicals you receive as part of your food business are safe and suitable for use. A program could enable you to determine the ability and willingness of a supplier to meet your product specifications and establish a formal agreement with your chosen suppliers to ensure compliance of the products you receive. Establishing a formal agreement helps ensure that they share the responsibility for the food and may reduce the level of preventative controls needed by you upon receiving. So it takes a little bit of burden off your business. While this guidance document provides information that can help you develop a program, it is not exhaustive. The specification of the program will be unique for each business. The criteria and requirements of a supplier agreement will depend on the size and complexity of the food business and the hazards that represent the risk of contamination to the food. Like Lindsay mentioned, you can have a small mom and pop, or you can have a large business that you want to develop, right? So it all depends on kind of who you're dealing with. For each product you are sourcing, you determine and outline the specifications that you require and that apply to you. So for microbial food safety factors, you can look at things like time and temperature controls to prevent the growth of pathogens, parameters to prevent growth of pathogens such as water and pH, use of inhibitors to prevent growth of pathogens. For chemical food safety factors, you need to look at veterinary drugs and pesticide residues limits, permitted food additives. So again, if they're changing an ingredient or something on you, all those factors would be necessary to look at because food additives would need to be declared. Maximum levels for contaminants and toxins, allergens, so making sure, depending on who your supplier is and where they are they aware of all the priority allergens in Canada? And are they declaring and including all those allergens? Compositional requirements, so grades, composition, quality of the product. Suitability factors, so signs of deterioration or damage to the products, maintained under sanitary conditions, are they free from filth, insect chemicals, or foreign substances? Food labeling requirements, so again, you need to look at declaration of allergens present or that have come into food contact, so maybe there's a make contain statement that needs to be added. List of ingredients, product name, storage conditions, cooking instructions, net content declarations, packaging requirements such as, is it a food grade packaging? What container sizes do you need? Is the food packaging permeable? Storage temperature requirements such as refrigeration at 4 degrees or less to prevent spoilage or growth of pathogens, or does it need to be frozen? So supplier selection, kind of our main point here. Select your suppliers on their ability and willingness to provide the products that comply with your specifications. A questionnaire can be used to gather the information needed to better understand the supplier, their products, and the food safety controls in place. It can help you obtain information on whether the company has adequate controls to ensure the safety and suitability of the products supplied and whether they are subject to oversight by a recognized body. Consider the following questions when selecting a supplier to establish a supplier agreement. Is the supplier a license holder under the Safe Food for Canadian regulations? Does the supplier have a HACCP-based system in place that is audited by an independent qualified auditor, or are they certified against the Global Food Safety Initiative, or GFSI, recognized program or other accredited certification body? Is the supplier subject to a foreign system of inspection that is recognized by Canada? Is the supplier licensed or certified by a foreign regulated body as eligible to produce and or export those products? Does the supplier train their employees in hygienic manufacturing practices and safety hazards? Does the supplier have controls to ensure the maintenance and operation of their establishment storage and or transport of products in a clean, sanitary condition, including focus on sanitation, personal hygiene, pest control, conditions of the establishment, removal of contaminated materials, waste in a manner that does not pose a risk of contamination. Does the supplier have a third-party audit of their food system? Can the supplier provide those audit reports to you? Because that would be important. Can the supplier provide certificates of analysis that demonstrate product compliance with specifications from a Canadian laboratory accredited by Standard Councils of Canada or a foreign laboratory accredited to international recognized standards? Does the supplier have controls for allergens? So CFIA has allergen checklists that you can use to give to your supplier and see if they meet those allergen requirements. Does the supplier have controls to ensure the ingredients and materials they obtain manufacture, prepare, treat, or preserve a food, ingredient, or manufacture packaging materials and labels are safe and suitable? Is the supplier only a distributor, or are they the person that manufactures, prepares, stores, packages, labels the product? If yes, can they demonstrate that they have adequate controls to ensure that they obtain products that meet your specifications? So if they're just a distributor, they need to get that information for you for that ingredient. As applicable, obtain and review the following specifications on their ingredients. For example, their shelf life, as Lindsay mentioned, the materials, the packaging materials they use, the physiochemical properties such as pH or water activity. For packaging materials and labels, for example, chemical migration, physical dimensions, material specifications. Is the performance of the material good? For non-food chemicals, for example, conditions of use including what can it be used on, the concentration of the use of the chemical, such as dilution with water. There has to plan and controls for their maintenance and operation of their establishment in a clean and sanitary condition. Letters of no objection from Health Canada. So if you're using a food additive that isn't actually allowed to be used in that manner in the regulations, do they have a letter of no objection from Health Canada to say, yes, this food additive is allowed to be used in this way? Certificates of analysis showing their product is safe and has a good history of compliance. So if you're dealing with a supplier who's had salmonella issues with their spices, and you probably don't want to use that supplier because they're probably not getting that product in a hygienic manner, or it's probably not manufactured well. When feasible, conduct an on-site visit of the supplier's premises to confirm the accuracy and the implementation of their controls. If the supplier is subject to a third-party audit, obtain a copy of the audit reports and review. The reason we always recommend that you visit your suppliers is they can say whatever they want on paper, but if you go there, you review their programs, and you see how they're manufacturing that, that would actually give you a very good picture of how they're doing their job. Supplier agreements. The agreements you establish with the supplier states the terms they are expected to meet. For example, agreements could define the documents to be provided by the supplier as an ongoing assurance that the product they supply continue to meet the terms of the agreement. So letter of continuing guarantee accompanying each product supplied. Each product supplied comes with a certificate of analysis, audit reports from independent or qualified auditors. The requirements for notifying you of changes to specifications of their product or ingredients of food they supply. So I know previously Lindsay mentioned where a supplier you want to buy in bulk, but let's say you run out and you didn't make sure that you got the ingredient, ordered it 6 months ahead of time. Now you can't get it. Now you're going to run to your wholesale club and get the ingredient, but you have to now make sure that whatever you're getting, or if your supplier is doing the same thing, that they're not supplementing it with something that's missing on the label. So making sure that that accuracy is there in your labels. What they should expect in terms of on-site visits by you or a third-party audit for accuracy and effectiveness of their controls. What is required of them when you identify an issue with their product? So this includes documents showing that they took corrective action measures and to prevent the reoccurrence of whatever has happened. So kind of giving you, giving you that guarantee that this will not happen again. The agreement duration and renewal. Each supplier agreement should be signed and dated by you and the supplier. List of suppliers. It is important to maintain a list of suppliers that you have established an agreement with and to refer to this list when receiving products to verify that they are from one of your suppliers. A list of suppliers could describe the name and contact information of your supplier, a description of product covered by the terms of your agreement with them, date the agreement with them expires. The supplier list should be up to date and amended anytime a new supplier is chosen or an existing agreement with the supplier is terminated. Verification of the program. The program should be verified at least annually to make sure that there's been no changes with your supplier or anything that you specified with them. Determine how well your supplier controls are working. Established verification procedures that outline the activities to be conducted, such as inspection, testing of incoming materials, on-site audits of suppliers to assess their food safety system, including their control measures, records and the state of the establishment equipment, review third-party audit reports, the procedures for each activity, who will conduct the verifications, how the activities are completed, frequency of each activity. Once you've established a program, maintaining and updating the program is very important, and this will affect the regulated party's bottom line as well as yours. So the better program you can have in place and the suppliers are meeting your requirements without issues, um, it's gonna define your bottom line. Uh, thank you, and that's all I had today.
Thank you, Shazia. So Lindsay, if you want to turn your camera back on and we will get going with some questions here, ladies. So first question, do buyers require the product to be tracked through the supply chain, such as temperature, humidity, location?
You want to take that, Shazia? I can say yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
For
you can go for it.
traceability or food safety, for traceability and food safety purposes, yes, that should be tracked. Each level should be tracking their own, because let's say if CFIA were to do an inspection, we would ask each level to provide those documentations and show where they were responsible and how they tracked it to meet all the specifications.
Thank you. Can the speakers comment on doing your due diligence, as often a cheap price or great deal isn't what it appears to be for quality, etc.?
Yeah, that is so true. You get what you pay for. So I think it does come down to making sure it does it fit your food safety? Does it fit the packaging type that you need? And also just yeah, the price might work, but that doesn't always mean that's the right decision for your business to make because of values or whatever the case might be. So that's something you really need to assess on your own, because the other flip side is that the most expensive ingredients that you can find, and the most innovative and the most certifications on board sometimes doesn't leave you much margin for your products, your finished goods at the end. So there is that kind of balance on deciding what do you want for ingredients, but cheaper is not always better, and neither is all your ingredients being really expensive. It's sort of like it's that old adage of, do you want it cheap, fast, and have quality? Well, you can only pick two. Sometimes you can all have all three. That's what I think for wishful thinking, but that would be my comment on it. What do you think, Shazia?
No, I agree with you. I mean, you can get the most expensive ingredient that has very stringent specifications. But again, if something happens and you didn't order it in time, like Lindsay had mentioned before, now you're stuck. So now you're replacing it with something, but you have to change a lot of things now on your end. So
Yeah,
it's going to cost you even more. So you
yeah,
kind of
and
have
I
to
would
see what's
say
best for you.
having that secondary supplier is really important. You mentioned that,
Mm.
Shazia, is having always
Yeah.
that back pocket secondary supplier that's
Hmm.
already qualified. Yeah.
All right, thank you, ladies. So I want to make claims on my food on my website that it is made of organic ingredients. What kind of proof can I show my consumers without showing who I am sourcing from? I want to
Mm.
keep my sources proprietary, but still provide proof that my ingredients are organic or MSC for marine sources.
That's a really good question. Obviously, your organic certification is going to be really important. You could talk about your sourcing strategies and saying that, I uphold not only organic, but even beyond that for my sourcing strategies. But I think that certification on your website is going to be important. There are different certifying bodies for organic, so it's just dependent on, what your supplier has and what you have. But I think that's important. And I understanding that you do want to keep some proprietary nature of where you're sourcing because it's like, hey, there's only one supplier of this marine collagen and it's organic. And it's like, hey, I know exactly where they got their product from, right? So it is some balance on that. My caveat is that I think sometimes food manufacturers get really excited about proprietary information. It's pretty hard to keep it a secret, and pretty much any food technologist can reverse that. So I think that most consumers are not going to start sourcing things on their own, and just be assured that I think transparency and being really open about how you're sourcing sometimes builds a better trust for the customer anyway. So if you've done all this work to source this ingredient, they're probably not going to do that work themselves, but they're going to trust you to do it.
Perfect, thank you. So, next question. Should the supplier provide that all food labeling and microbial I'm just microbiology
Microbiological.
analysis because it's not the whole the word here. Should I pay for a third party lab to check and would that be enough?
So what we always recommend is having that documentation from your supplier to show you that on a consistent basis their product is coming in safe, right? So they don't have E. coli or salmonella issues, or any other bacterial issues. But we also just suggest that you as a manufacturer or distributor, whatever you want to be as a supplier, are also responsible. So having some sort of a verification plan, timed for annually, would be a great idea. So you don't have to, depending on what your product is, you may want to do it every couple months just to double check. Are they giving you the correct product? So yes, it's a great idea to put that into your program.
Yeah. And the recall will be up to you. If there
Yes,
is a micro
yes,
issue,
yes,
the recall will
yes.
come back to your sauce. And then now you're going to have to trace back whose fault it was. And that's just a mess. So yeah, the CFA is really going to help. But for sure,
Hmm.
we've done spot micro on some things, right? When we were sourcing ingredients just to make sure that everything was good.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So this is for both of you. What is the best way to contact or communicate with you, email or phone calls?
I'm an old school
So,
phone call person, but email's always good. We just get too many emails. So phone is just fun because I get to talk to a human.
so with the
Perfect.
CFIA, I mean, you can go through the main office and you can talk to, like, there's just not just me, but there's a bunch of us. So you can be directed to the right place. So the CFIA main office would probably be your best bet. But if you wanted to get a hold of me, or yeah, phone call or email is fine.
Great, thank you, ladies. When importing, how can I make sure about the hygienic manufacturing practices and inspection that is recognized in Canada by the supplier? Is there any documents besides the COA and others mentioned on the last slide? Okay, so that must be you, Shaz, yeah.
Yeah, so basically what we say is that there is auditing bodies out there, and they are recognized internationally or nationally. You want to find those recognized bodies. Are they doing the third party audits for that company? You can use those audit reports, and that's why we say get the audit reports, look at them, see what they say, and then source your suppliers from them. There's also on the CFIA website, we have equivalency agreements with certain countries, especially the US, where we have the same sort of food safety system. And we trust that they're doing the same things as we are. So if they're eligible to export and we're eligible to export, then you can pretty much say, yeah, okay, there's an equivalency agreement. But if it's outside internationally, then you want to get those third party audit reports, or you want to give them the third party audit body that you want to go out there and say, can you please have this body audit you? I
Perfect,
hope
thank
that
you.
helps. Yeah,
If not, they'll let us know.
sure,
So
sounds
next
good.
question. Can I create an agreement for the supplier to sign if they don't have one?
Yes,
Yeah, I would
yes, you
say
can. Yeah, you
definitely.
create. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Go ahead, Lindsay.
So on the food safety side of things, is that the question, do you think, or is that just on supplying, like actually having a secure supply?
Not sure. You can answer both.
Okay. So I'll answer on the secure supply side of things. So yes, oftentimes if it's a difficult ingredient to source or it's on allocation, meaning it's limited supply, we definitely create agreements to help with our customers so that they have assurance on the price isn't going to go up crazy and you're also going to have a certain amount of supply. Let's say it's monthly that you need products to go by. So that's absolutely fine. We have our own agreements, but you guys can come to us with your agreements as well. So it's perfectly fine to draft an agreement saying, hey, I expect to have this product once a month at this time. It might be harder to uphold with a smaller supplier. So that's my only kind of caveat around that. But I think on the food safety side of things, yeah, Shazia, I think a lot of there's documentation to be created, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, so I mean, on the supplier end, we suggest that you create that document for the food safety side, only because it's you wanting to say, okay, you got to meet the Canadian requirements if it's for allergens, micro, chemical, whichever it is, and how the ingredients should be coming in. So you would create that document and then get them to agree to it. Yes, with the smaller supplier, it's going to be hard, but at least they have something in writing that they have to follow for you. So I would still suggest that you get that agreement signed and then, like I said, review it hopefully annually, and then both of you get that signed.
Okay, and this is the same person asking questions. So what documents should they provide for ethically sourcing and correct practices that goes way back to the producer side?
You want to
We
answer
get
that,
that
Lindsay?
question. We get that question a lot. So we have some of our larger manufacturers, food manufacturers, that require some parameters around, not using child labor, ethical practices in sourcing, ethical payment. These are all within your right to ask. Is it going to be a bit nebulous coming back? Yes. There are some certifying bodies who do control that, saying that it's not being produced in that. So most of the manufacturers are asking for a letter from the supplier saying that they are using ethical practices to source ingredients, and you are taking them at their word. But as Shazia mentioned, there are third-party auditing bodies that can help with that. Um, so in the early 2000s, we sourced from Asian sources, so it was tricky. We couldn't always be there to see if they were using child labor or if they're taking water from the river and not treating it when it goes back in the river. So we had to have a lot of documentation in place to make sure, and then we used our own auditing body plus our own staff to go there and do spot surprise audits as well. So that is really tricky because it's important. I can hear that that question is really profound, and that we want to make sure that what we're making has ingredients that are being sourced in the right and most ethical way. So, happy to unpack if that's not exactly the answer to the question that you're looking for.
All right, thank you. Next question. Can you comment on using a third-party logistics company and how you can ensure that the food products that are temperature sensitive are maintained? Are there some regulatory bodies followed by the 3PLS? I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure you do.
Third party logistics.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll pick up on the third party logistics, but there is a big cold chain thing that I'd love to hear from Shadi on.
Sure.
So, choosing your third party logistics partner, whether or not they're doing 3PL warehousing or trucking, is really important. Ensuring that the truck does not contain chemicals, like actual, let's say it's fertilizer going in with your food product, is really important. So most third-party logistic partners will state that they're food safe, and that's really good. And they'll have some documentation to ensure that. And it's working with the right partners. So when they're delivering, it's making sure that there's non-food related things and there's not drums of leaking chemical going in. But for the most part, if they say they're food safe, they're following that. And we get audited on our warehouse in Brampton and Delta and Quebec and in the US on that food safety storage that we're doing, because we also supply to pharma and pet food and industrial. So there should be some ways in there, and it is a bit tricky in taking your word for it, but when they're being delivered to your co-packer or delivered to you, it's doing a quick check, and you're in the absolute right to reject that. You're in the right to say, no, it didn't maintain the cold chain. I can see things are thawing out, or it's stored in an improper manner, or the pallet's breaking down. There are some cool technologies to monitor cold chain over time. So there's these little things you can put in the boxes that monitors the cold chain, but I think technology is really moving on that way. But Shazia, what are you seeing, especially on that maintaining the cold chain over time?
So right now, we rely a lot on the documentation, and with the Safe Food for Canadian regulations, traceability is a must for everybody. Either it's tracing forward or tracing back, and that includes your transportation and maintenance of your cold storage of your products. So you have to be able to show, as we mentioned before, kind of how did that product leave your establishment? What trucking company did you use? What is your agreement with that trucking company? So we have seen way in the past where there was, chips transported with gasoline, and then you got a lot of complaints with the chips having that gasoline smell. Well, that shouldn't happen now. With the agreements in place, that trucking company should be, okay, this is only food. We transport chemicals in a different container, and they should have that agreement in place. So each area as you go on should have an agreement in place. So then that trunking company goes to a distribution company. That distribution company should have special areas, again, agreements. This is only for food. This is for non-food, and that should be something that you should be able to look at. And that's why we also say if you have the ability and it's feasible, you should be kind of taking the time to do that visit to see how things are done, and how those companies, I mean, if they're large enough, they should be able to let you in and say, okay, come take a look how we do things, because they do want more customers, right? So it's having those agreements in place, looking at the documentation, the audit reports, and any kind of temperature logs along the way. So even if they don't have that technology to put in a box to do that, if once the trucking company comes to you, you can take a thermometer and check the truck yourself, right? So doing those checks, and if that load isn't feasible to you, you can reject it, like Lindsay said. Those trucking companies have insurance, or the whoever the manufacturer was has the insurance. If they weren't able to maintain it, then you shouldn't be taking it.
Perfect. Thanks, ladies. Next question. I am selling raw food products. I will be doing a test and hold protocols until food are third party tested by a lab before we release our products. I know there is still a risk of bacteria, even if all the results are negative. What disclaimers can I put in my product?
I don't know if you can really put any disclaimers in your product. I mean, you should know what the hazards are associated with that product that you're sending out. So if it's a raw product, you know that it could contain salmonella, E. coli, whichever. At the same time, if it's raw, it's probably going for further processing. Um, and, unless it's going to a sushi place, I don't know. But if it's going for further processing, then the further processing place will know what the hazards are associated with that product and what time and temperature controls they need to have in place to, get rid of whatever additional bacteria may be in that product. But if you're doing that extra analysis on the raw product and you have that consistent basis to show that you've been testing and the product has been good, at least we know that you have some sort of a compliance history. And then that company who's getting the product knows about your compliance history. So they're able to take your product and be like, okay, if this time and temperature has been okay so far, it should still be okay this far. And then it's up to the manufacturer who made that product and to figure out at the end if there's a bacterial load still available in that product.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
then
Sorry, Lindsay, do you
obviously
have something to
working,
add?
yeah, just working with a food technologist to help you with, is it's a raw product, but there's a lot of things you can do on pH and water activity and all sorts of cool natural ways of preserving that product and then preventing, because none of you are in the business of wanting to hurt people and get them sick, and then they'll never buy again anyway. But I think it's just the food technologists, that's what they do, right? They make food that is safe and also tastes good, but safety first. And I think it's just there are some really neat technologies to making even a raw product be more stable.
Great. Thank you. So, next question. Can you share the name of audit bodies that are global? And we can share that in a follow-up email if you would like, instead of just doing it this way.
I'll just answer that on my part. I believe there is a link. I can share that, but there is many global bodies or national bodies that you can look up. But I'll see if I can share that link.
Yeah, so
Perfect. That would be
QAI,
fantastic.
yeah, QAI is for organic. There's
Mhm.
SQF and BRC, GFSI. GFSI is Global Food Safety Initiative. So these are really great, but there's lots of certifying bodies too. So yeah, that would be nice for somebody to have that in their back pocket.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, ladies. I look forward to receiving that information from you. So, next question, actually, final question that we have is how often should you reevaluate your suppliers? Is it every 6 months, yearly, or what?
Um, okay, so yearly is what we do. So we work with fairly large manufacturers, and they definitely work yearly with us to get certifications and all of the documentations and for food safety and for qualifying and their quality program every year. But they're also monitoring if that kosher cert's expiring, they're wanting it right away too. So this is a big part of my job is making sure that all of the certifications and we work with the supplier to make sure. So I think every year gut check yourself too. If you feel like something's up, probably maybe it is. If the C of A looks funky, right, you should be getting a certificate of analysis for each of your products. Um, for the most part, I know it's tough with raw things, so maybe not. But if things just don't look right, delve into it and do more. So it's up to you to do your due diligence to make sure that your products are up to snuff.
Okay,
Yeah, and we
perfect.
say the
And
same thing annually, but if there's like, if you know they've changed ingredients or changed something on you, then you want to update that agreement as soon as possible.
perfect. So, we're just right over time here. I have one final question. Are you ladies okay with answering the last
Yeah.
question? Okay, for organic produce, do they have to be subjected to a wash?
Ooh.
And that's
Depends.
I
okay,
can go
So
Eileen.
first.
I
I
see that,
put I,
Marguerite, that you did that. The Canada GAP program has protocols about fresh vegetables and harvest and post-harvest controls. We'll send you the link with our follow-up email. So you ladies are off the hook.
okay,
Yeah. Thanks, Marguerite.
awesome.
Thanks, Eileen.
All
I would
right,
say
so
yes. There's still lots of dust and dirt on things. Organic is great, but there's inherent spores and things that can really hurt people. So I think so, but again, I don't know what the product is. It's tougher for me to say, but it is up to you to make your product safe. So yeah, but sometimes the
oh,
water is not always as clean as the product comes in too. So there's some of these caveats around.
absolutely. So, all right, thank you, Lindsay and Shazia, for sharing all of your knowledge today. I always learn so much on our webinars, and so thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you
So
for
to
Yeah,
having
ev
us.
thanks for having
you
us.
are
It was such a treat.
You are most welcome. And so to everyone else, you will receive a short survey at the end of this webinar. Your help will be great for us in determining what other webinars that we should organize for you. This survey that we have will take you no more than a couple of minutes, less than that actually, to complete. In the comments at the last question, I would really like for you to let me know how easy or hard was this new software for you to navigate, just so we know going forward what we should be doing. And so, to everyone, thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day. See you later, everyone. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Good
Bye.
luck.
Thank you.